Hey everyone, this is Parthy from Letter Drop. Welcome to our podcast where we talk to folks on how your approach to go to market needs to change. The market's been changing pretty rapidly over the past decade. The playbooks from before are not going to work for you necessarily in the future. And I'm really excited to talk to Mark Jung today. He just started his new LinkedIn agency, which helps CEOs, founders really tell their story and figure out like their go to market on LinkedIn. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Parthy. Appreciate you having me here. I'm excited to dig in because LinkedIn's the future of B2B and still less than 3% of companies are actively posting every day. So massive opportunity. Yeah, I'm looking forward to jumping in.
Awesome. Mark, tell me a little bit about your story and kind of how you got here. So you worked at a whole bunch of really exciting companies, including some companies which saw some hyper growth stages like Dooley, and you're VP of marketing in a whole bunch of these places. Tell me a little bit more about your story, your journey to this point.
Cool. The one liner I always describe it is I left management consulting and like classic full suit and tie, kind of like downtown style. So I ditched a suit for sneakers and SaaS. And that was about a little less than 4 years ago. And the reason for me was kind of left agency life behind, left management consulting and started getting into tech. My partner at the time was sort of like head of strategy of Unbounce. And, she was working in tech. So she said, hey, like come make this transition. And Dooley was the first startup that I worked for. So the way that I like to describe this is just had joined Dooley. Company had been around for 4 or 5 years and had some traction, but really wanted to take things to the next level. And for those that don't know, Dooley is a platform that is built to help sales teams really just interact with Salesforce better and bring a component of like enablement. And had just joined. We had raised a little bit of funding. And the company had about like 4 months of cash left. And this is right before the pandemic was starting. And we had plans for an additional fundraise. I had just started as, VP of marketing coming in and had grand plans, had team, and the pandemic hit. And basically my CEO turns to me and says, hey, the VC that was going to put in money, they're not investing right now. Like we're on hold. So we had 4 months of cash. I was the only marketer, and I was basically told that not only did I have to bring this story and this product to market, but I had to do it with like no team, no resources, and also like managing through the world that was remote at that time. So no pressure in this moment. And one of the first things that I did was I looked at like what is the massive upside where there's huge asymmetrical risk in terms of an opportunity to like drive demand for the business. What I mean by that was we had a product-led solution. So it's free to use. Anyone can plug it and use it. How do I go from, new to this company, new to SaaS, to suddenly reaching like hundreds of thousands of salespeople using Salesforce? And I just started researching and kind of looking into what companies were doing. Again, couldn't do paid, couldn't do organic or search because, timeline was too short. Couldn't do partnerships. We didn't have a big ecosystem, but I saw a massive opportunity in organic social, specifically on LinkedIn, on Instagram. TikTok wasn't as huge as it was today. And I looked for an opportunity where there was distribution. And I found that there were these very specific humor-based pages around sales humor that existed on LinkedIn, but no B2B brands were partnering or creating content within them. So I said, this is a massive opportunity that we should use as a launch pad to build brand awareness around both the company and our content. Because one, memes and humor and content, I think people conflate playful with silly. So one of the most powerful ways you can actually tell a story. So fast forward to me just cold pitching the founders of these sales humor arms. I said, hey, if I create some content and post it for you and give you 100% of the revenue or 50% of the revenue of like a rev share going forward, would you post some of that content? Me, after some creative outreach, we figured out a way to make that work. And they started posting content for us. The very first thing we posted was like the Indiana Jones skeleton in front of a computer versus the person being alive, like the melting face. And it just said like, just need to enter something into Salesforce real quick, before and after. Just a meme, right? We put a link to it. And within the first week we started doing this, we increased our web traffic by close to 3,000. And we quickly found that organic, not just for like humor and content, but was like the best vehicle for us to grow. Fast forward to 6-8 months later, we raised more than $80 million. We grew the company from like hypergrowth We scaled the team, and everything was founded on LinkedIn and organic content. And that's kind of part of my story of how I fell in love with content, and really like the power of it. But I know we're trying to keep things super short. So we'll run things back and we can kind of talk tactics and more of where that's transitioned to today.
Absolutely. That sounds super unorthodox. So I'm glad that you tried something and it worked. I think especially in very crowded markets, more growth in marketing, people need to just ditch the playbook and figure out, okay, like how do I go out on my own and try to do something a little bit different? And
100%.
honestly, just I mean, I'm not saying like you shouldn't eat your vegetables and do like the basics, but I think everybody needs to make room for the little out there crazy stuff as well.
Yeah, and I mean, one other quick anecdote. We launched a show at Julie called Fire Talks, and it was a riff on a popular YouTube show where we had hot chicken and hot sauce with some of the top go-to-market leaders. So within the first 30 days of us doing that, and kind of fast forward to doing it for close to 3 months, we had the CMO at Gong on, and we were the first show to talk about their Super Bowl ad from this no-name seed-funded brand we had when by the time we stopped the show, about 350 companies lined up to participate on it. And the reason being, it was like everyone was doing Zoom webinars and boring content. So we found a more interesting way to deliver and educate to people. We reached close to 500,000 people within the first 30 days of that show alone. Right. So it's like there were so many ways that if we had just done the same playbook as everyone else, we would have blended into the sea of SaaS.
And tell me a little bit more about how you think about the sort of like out there type content and playbooks when it comes to some of the clients you're working with now, right? So when you work with a new customer, like are you thinking just like crazy new ideas, or are you thinking more about, okay, how do I just tell their story and how do I figure out like what are the different levels of problem awareness that we can talk about?
Yeah, the most important way to think of it, and if any of you listening may know sort of my partner, Daniel Murray, or some of the media arms behind us, the marketing millennials, the biggest thing that marketers can find power in is storytelling. And stories tend to connect to what we like really feel deeply, like the social and emotional pains. One of the best things you can do with organic content is not just talk about the how to, right? It's like the how I stories. And what we found is the way that we work in like a really compressed way is we'll take a business and we'll say, hey, like, what's your goal right now? What are you trying to do? We understand not just like the mechanics of their ideal customer profile, their go-to-market motion, their like position in the category, but we then start to think of like, what's the one thing you want to be known for? We often call like the hill that you, if it's an executive or a company, would die on, like the one thing you want to be remembered for. From there, we'll kind of set what we call like the mantra or the pillar behind the business, like the one founding idea. For me, mine is B2B shouldn't be boring. And I think people conflate serious, that B2B needs to be serious. But the most effective content in my career has been humorous, it's been emotional, it's been playful, right? And it's helped me grow multiple 7-figure businesses behind it, right? But people often conflate like B2B and serious. So like that's the hill that I would die on. From that, we build kind of 3 supporting pillars around that in a content matrix with about 15 different types of content across each of those sub pillars. And the goal of those is essentially match the emotional journey and your customer journey and the different stages that your potential buyers are going through against those pillars to make sure that we're hitting the key points in the story. And the reason is only 3% of B2B people in market are actually ready to buy. 97% of your audience are not ready to buy. Your goal with content is not to get leads. Your goal is to build affinity and trust. So when those 97% are ready, you are there and they think of you first. So a big part of what we do with storytelling, with content, with humor, with how I is kind of reverse engineer that process and build content such that you can get on people's radar, connect with them, and have them see you as the authority. But the key thing, and the reason why this is our tagline, to become an authority, you first need attention. The biggest things that companies get wrong, especially in B2B, is they create content that's about them and their product. It's company first content, as opposed to thinking about the audience and what problems that they actually have. So we help reverse engineer that to where you get attention in your niche. We tell you, and show you how to tell stories that connect to people in that journey to reach that 97%. And we do this in a way that's going to let you grow in really like a sustainable fashion where you're just talking about like your experience and the problems, but you're doing it in a way that has what we call channel content fit. If you just take a clip, like a clip of this podcast, and upload it to TikTok and maybe throw it into like Submagic and do something with it, it's probably going to die on the vine because you didn't design that clip for that channel. The same is true for LinkedIn, which is where we spend 100% of our focus. You need to design the content specifically for LinkedIn. That same post may not perform on Twitter, and I still will call it Twitter because X just feels like Xavier. But channel content fit is the next thing, is really being intentional and working with experts in their niche. Because if someone tells you they're an expert at Reddit, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, email, they're probably not an expert in any of them. And your razor should always be, if people brag more about what they're saying, they're probably less good. If they're more humble, they're probably quite good, and try to pick an expert and really stay in that.
Got it. In terms of, you talked about something interesting, which was sort of channel content fit, and something that works on LinkedIn could not work on a different channel. Can you talk to me a little bit more about what works on LinkedIn versus other places, specifically for B2B companies?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example from a post that I wrote a few days ago. And really what you need to do, and if you don't follow Brian Balfour over at Reforge, he's been one of the sort of like early growth marketers that I followed that helped me shape my understanding of product marketing and storytelling and how to do this. He has a model called the 4 Fits model. And the 4 Fits model, essentially like channel model fit. Go take a look at it. Read the article. It's a 4-part series. It's fantastic. Content channel fit in this case is kind of like an adaptation of his model. And it's really about understanding, again, what your audience expect to see. In LinkedIn specifically, there's about 4 or 5 types of content that we find perform best. LinkedIn, really depending on the time of day, you might have 2 minutes between a meeting, or you might have 30 minutes at the beginning of the day consuming like news and what's valuable to you, or like you're looking for a solution. You need to identify that people are going to be in different states depending on the time of day, what they're doing, sort of how they're interacting with the platform. So the 4 or 5 types of content that work really well, one is like, teach me something, but don't teach me something that I could Google. I want to hear your story and what you learned. So not how to content, but how I content. And the most important thing that people get wrong with that is they don't connect it to a good hook. And when we go through and kind of analyze like your profile and your content, I can show you how we write hooks, how we write read hooks, what that looks like. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have attention on LinkedIn, close to 75% of people from one of the more recent studies that came out don't expand your about you section on LinkedIn. They just see your first 2 lines. The same is true for your content. You could have, Michelangelo's David in your post, but if your hook isn't good, it's not powerful, it's not compelling, no one's going to read that content. So your how I story needs to have power words, it needs to have contrast, it needs to be like a strong movie trailer that has tension between your opening line, your hook, and your second line, which is your rehook. It should be like a really good first date, which it gives you enough indication that you want to learn more, right? See them again, but not enough where you feel like you've seen it all and you don't need to expand that section. So that's number 1. Number 2 is entertain me, right? LinkedIn, work is stressful. Working in SaaS, we came off some back-to-backs. Ourselves right now is like, sometimes I just want to be entertained. I want to see something. I want to bring some joy to my day. Third thing is challenge me. I might have a perspective that, a new idea that you had that I haven't thought of. I want to be exposed to new ideas and sort of broaden my thinking. Don't be afraid to bring your challenger point of view. My favorite analogy is, you don't want to be like that chicken dish at a wedding. You know, that like safe dish that a lot of people serve because it's not going to offend anyone. Yes, it's not going to offend anyone, but it will not be memorable. You will not be remembered for that. Your content needs a clear, strong stance, and you should build something that 100 people will love, not like 1,000 people will kind of like, or you're not saying anything memorable. So challenge people, don't be afraid to do that. And then inspire people, motivate people, share your stories and the things that are going to bring people that jolt of energy, the same way that my cold brew coconut milk, which is really what fuels my body, does. Those are really the 4 key types of content that tend to perform best. I think we can talk about the algorithm, we can talk about what's working, we can talk about like the tactical stuff, but if you just focused on those specifically, it's going to help not only get you to build attention, but your how you stories, backed by data, backed by proof points, backed by the exact thing you did and what you learned, are what going to get you traction and trust over time.
Got it. What would you say to founders or CEOs or CMOs of companies where a lot of people don't really have these kind of how you stories, is the reality of the situation, right? And so how would you encourage them to start thinking about these or looking for them in their day to day, or like how do you go about finding this for your business?
So I think there's a misconception there because everyone has a story the same way that everyone has a personal brand. Whether or not you want to, you have a personal brand. Your lack of a personal brand is your personal brand. And the same with your stories. You just need to have someone who's really good at asking questions to bring them out. Some of my favorite questions that you can ask people, and again, you can take these from wherever. Some of these I found from Tim Ferriss and Tribe of Mentors, some of these from just different podcasts, but find really good questions for your team and think about the most emotional, powerful, or sort of like transitional moments in your career or in your journey building those almost like times where think of like the Avengers timeline where like a branch happened and something the way you thought about either like business, leadership, life, teams changed as a result of that moment. So one question that we ask, our clients, and we're trying to understand what matters to them, their hill they would die on, their like founding pillar is if you had infinite money overnight and you get every single media outlet in the world and you get to put only one message up on billboards all over the world, what is that one message? And we go through kind of a list of, 20, 30, 40, 50 questions and understand their journey, what they're going through, what they've learned, the principles behind them. Another great question to ask is, what's one piece of advice that you see in the industry as a common practice or best practice that you think is completely wrong? You see what I'm doing there with that question? I'm trying to find their challenger point of view, trying to find what's unique to their take that's different from what everyone takes as a best practice, right? And you see the first question, I'm trying to understand your motivation, what's important to you, what's your grounding principle? All of these questions and becoming someone who is asking better questions will get you to better stories. So study great questions, study great storytellers, and run some of these retros with your team internally. It's gonna be like one of the best ways you can do it. If a project went really well or really poorly, unpack that with the 5 why system. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Okay, what was the root cause of that? Like dig in and understand. Every single day we have learnings, we have stories. It could be our upbringing, our career, our business. You just need to find the right emotional ones that map to what your audience care about, what your customer care about, and what have power and like a gravitas that's going to get people engaged on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I've seen, think about like marketing leaders, or just folks in marketing teams who maybe they sell into this, they're in cybersecurity or something along those lines, right? And how would you get like a marketer at like a cybersecurity company to think about creating content that like a chief security officer would maybe care about, right? And they're not cybersecurity experts.
All right. So this was actually one of the most common questions I had when I was speaking at South by Southwest on stage last year. And it was from fintech, IT security, like really deeply technical industries where the marketer may not be a subject matter expert. It's like, how do you find a way to relate to an audience, especially like a C-level audience? Here's 3 of the things that I always recommend that if you're not doing today, it's your superpower. Number 1, you will only be able to tell good stories by how deeply you understand 1, your audience, and 2, like your customer. And one of the best ways that you should do that, and every marketer should be doing this today, is 1, first things first, if you have some type of recording software or Gong or whatever it is, there's a really great framework by Joanna Weeb when she was running Copy Hackers that I've used at every company, which is take your like ideal customer profiles, break them out to kind of like the first 1 to 3 buyers, and go put a Google Sheet together and basically put like in chronological order, like a list of who they are in the column, and then on the far right, basically like break these moments in time around what question that person asks when they're doing a discovery call with you, right? Let's say that you have one of your account executives running like a disco with that buyer, and you basically just map in chronological order like what they said in what order. And what you want to do there is look at the patterns that repeat after you've gone through 1 to 3 calls. Usually in the first like 3 to 4 calls, you'll see a pattern. And what you want to look for are what we call like aha moments, the documentary moments, the moments where they're talking in with power words, with passionate language, with hand gestures, where they're really talking about what they're feeling. And you want to look for the emotion and the subtext behind that thing, right? So let's say that you're dealing with a cybersecurity firm and they're figuring out, or you're selling like SOC 2 right? And they have an issue of like compliance and storage, and they have all of this stuff that's in, physical warehouses, let's say, like whatever it is, you'll be able to sense that from the weight of their language, how they're showing up, right? The way that they talk about it. And what you want to do is you want to pinpoint these like social and emotional stories and unpack like the what's happening behind them. Then once you have that, the thing you're going to want to do is just get really comfortable talking about that topic and using that as an opening question when you're at events, when you're on LinkedIn, when you're engaging in any type of community with that customer. And you want to find common grounds to understand where they're coming from, and like really the cliche version of like the, what keeps you up at night, but it's like understanding the stuff that they're going to bed thinking about, the stuff that on Monday morning they have, anxiety about, the way that you need to understand way more than just their functional jobs to be done. The next thing you want to do is have your team go to an event with these people. And this is what I've done in my last, really actually every role that I've been at. Go take your phone, go to an event, ideally something that's like a happy hour where your customers are going to be there, and just go open mic TikTok style and interview people and ask them questions. What we used to do literally is we would have Slack, and we would just hit the voice record in Slack. And obviously we'd make sure that people were okay with us recording before we had a conversation. And we'd say, hey, we've talked to 15 chief security officers, in the last 2 hours at this event. And like, here's what they've said. Their like number one issue is X, or like, here's what's going on. How do you think about that? Or like really like dig in with the language of how people have used and just like have a conversation and understand them. You will get so much gold that you can create stories and content from, because you're mirroring the language of what they're saying. You're finding the power words, and you're really like reflecting that you understand them. You can understand any audience as a marketer if you invest in actually talking to them. I think the biggest gap is marketers who are afraid to go and cold call someone, meet with a customer, go to that event. You need to be like on the front lines as a marketer, engaging with your audience, because they will give you everything you need to write. You just need to be able to like take that next step. And it's not we do this once a quarter. It's like you should be doing this every day, every week, and get super dialed in to understand like that voice of the customer.
That is such a great idea. I'm actually going to be in New York in a couple of weeks at the Pavilion CMO Summit and another conference, and I feel like I'm actually going to go do that, just TikTok style street video interviews with a bunch of CMOs. Let's do a little hands-on exercise. You have my LinkedIn profile. I've been pretty active on LinkedIn probably for the past year and a half. We get about 64% of our inbound from LinkedIn. I feel like I've cracked parts of it, but not all of it. I would love to get your sort of third-party opinion on like what I'm doing on LinkedIn, just like going through my profile.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull it up right now and we can take a look both at your content and how you're doing this right now. You want me to share? We'll look at this together. What's the best way for us to tackle this?
You can, just go through it top to bottom, look at some of the content, and let me know what you're observing, like what's working, what's not working.
All right. So going to look at your profile right now, and we'll run through sort of my reco on the first thing for profile, and then we'll talk about content. So one of the most important things that you want to do for LinkedIn is you want to have like a very clear call to action in your banner. You want to have a very simple headline that addresses like what you actually do and who you serve. So you've done a pretty reasonable job at that, right? You've got your title here, building the organic pipeline engine for B2B. I think that's good, right? If you're talking about specifically social or like how you do that or where you do that, I think you're actually solving a very interesting challenge from our conversation, which is one, a lot of teams want to invest in building personal brands for their executives, their go-to-market team, but they don't have the time to do it because they're so busy scaling. So I think one of the challenges that you're solving is that you help make it easy for those teams to actually create content using your platform, because once you connect it, anyone can repost, like, comment, engage, right? All from one place. You can have templates for your content. So I think there's a missing piece right now where a lot of this, turn content into pipeline, help B2B marketers understand, drive revenue. I think you're seeing something that's like more generic and top of funnel, when what you really solve for is like the emotional pain, and that pain that every scaling company has felt, which is like they only have a certain number of hours in the day. They understand the power of organic social. They want to invest, but they can't because of time, resources, commitment, you're solving that with your platform. So it goes a lot above just organic pipeline, right? There's that fear of missing out, right? There's only 3% of companies that are actively engaged on LinkedIn of over 1 billion users, right? It's first mover advantage. You should be one of those people, but you don't have time. So we help you do that in a way that lets you build a brand while still scaling your business, right? Like on easy mode. So that's missing right now. So right now, like the emotional hook, I would give you a C minus. I think you need to find a way to like to connect to that story and connect that back to the business. Because one of the biggest reasons why a lot of companies who are like doing lead generation or go to market fail in their approach at outbound or organic social is people see it and they go, lead generation. It's like, I get 1 million of those. And they heuristically bucket you into a camp. You need to find your unique angle, not of what makes you more of like better than someone else, but what makes you different. When I read this today, I get much more of like, you know, a little bit of like the same. I don't know that you quite stand out from like all of those other companies. So that'd be number one. Headshot's good. Now let's scroll down and we'll look at your featured section. Okay, this is okay. Generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to have one very clear call to action in your featured section. Either that's like maybe a Nevadic tour of your product that shows how it works. Maybe it's an asset that you built to get people, you know, your checklist on how to write hooks for personal brand. But like someone should come here, read what you're about, understand your unique point of view, and then clearly be able to take that next step in learning more about like you, your business. A lot of people just like choose their high performing post to feature, which is like fine. But I'm just seeing a bunch of like mentions here. I don't see like a clear line to like your company and what you're doing or like a next step that I can take. And there's also like a lot of stuff here. You want to have less is more. So analogy I always give is the jam experiment, if anyone's familiar with this from psychology perspective. It's a fair where a vendor comes and they have 20 jams on a table. And they're trying to sell jams and people are coming through and they use 20 jams for the first few hours. And then they take it back to just 5 jams. When they removed 15 jams, they increased their sales by close to 35%. And the reason was because of less choice. Same is true on LinkedIn. There are people that have 10 lines in their headline, 50 things in their banner, right? 5 things pinned in their feature section. You want to have one message, one thing people remember, and one clear next step that you should take. The more you add, it's the same way you add more features. It's not adding more power, it's adding more complexity. So always think Coco Chanel. What can I take off of my profile before leaving the house that's going to get it to a place where it's going to help people to convert? Okay, now we'll look at your about. Again, most people do not hit the see more. So this should tell me everything I need to know about what you do. Follow me to become a B2B growth and marketing superhero. I think this is a little bit cliche for marketers. I think the like rockstar ninja superhero, I would kill that word because I think a lot of people have a pain if they've been hired as a head of marketing or a VP of marketing. It's often a glorified way to say we're going to pay you a salary of one person, but you have to do the job of 4. So it's like a bit of a trigger word. And I think it's kind of like run its course and doesn't necessarily like say anything about like what you're doing, but like personal branding, the company and that gap. I think this is smart around, you know, your experience because social is about shortcuts. You want to have social trust of like what you're doing. But, you know, sustainable growth explorer, I think is another one of those more like jargon heavy terms that doesn't connect to marketers. And like this doesn't say anything. So from what I know about you, what that should say is like what we highlighted here, which is, you know, the power of organic social is X, but most companies can't do it because of Y. We help you solve it with Z, right? Proof points. Now, if I hit your see more, I don't know if you cover that off, so we'll see. I talk about what is letter drop and want to chat. So one thing you can do here is like there's some social trust missing in your about. It's like talk about the key things that give you expertise. So what you told me was, right, close to 65% of your inbound comes from your organic social. That's a proof point. That's missing in here, right? Find a way to drink your own champagne and link that to your like your content. And another thing that's really important is like use bullets and arrows to hit those key points where it's scannable. If someone has 10 seconds on your about page, like give me the data, give me the stories, give me a few quick bullets, funding raised, like whatever is going to be those like quick hits for trust. But I'd say from a language perspective, going to give you a D minus here. But again, happy to keep going, just being as candid as possible. Company experience, education. We'll look at your content really quick. And then we can deep dive a little bit. Okay, it's a good hook, but the challenge is you didn't rehook them. The modern CMO role is under scrutiny. Okay, well, tell me more about what I'm expecting to see, because otherwise I'm not quite sure how to tune in. Let's see the next one. Struggling to align marketing with her sales team. Now, yeah, way too long. What you want to do here is like in your hook, struggling to align, there's no power words in there. There's no emotion. There's none of that feeling of what that feels like. The same way that your words should be crunchy. They should have texture. They should evoke a feeling. Like that reads like in a very soft, passive voice about what that person is expecting to feel. When you're feeling something, you're feeling it, right? It's like you're picking your kids up while you're on a Zoom call trying to get go-to-market alignment because pipeline is 40% of where it needs to be and you have 10 days left in the quarter. Like that's a feeling. You want to evoke that feeling. Also, you should remove any of the extra words in an at mention because they take up unnecessary space. So like this part, get rid of that. You only have a certain amount of length to write your hooks. You want to keep them short. And again, this is a way too long of a rehook. Your rehook needs to be one line max, one line and one line. Another thing is like never use bolded words or some of the fancy text. LinkedIn actually downranks content that it flags as like too spammy. And sometimes when you use that formatted text, it can flag that. It also looks a little bit more from a marketing perspective, what I would consider like try hard. So generally speaking, just want to use like simple numbers, letters, bullets. It's easier to do. And also you're writing on like multiple line breaks here. Typically what you want to do is like max one line item and then try to have it truncate to read on mobile. Because again, most people are going to read on mobile. And in terms of your creative, like typically even for this clip, I know we're recording in like 1920 by 1080. You always want to be 1080 by 1080 for an important reason. Most people are consuming on mobile. When you have horizontal content, you're competing with not just one, but sometimes two other posts. When you have vertical content, you were the only person competing in that feed. So let's say that there was another post that you were interested in, but you had a horizontal creative. Maybe someone beneath had a topic I was super passionate about. I'm going to skip your post and go to that post. If I'm vaguely interested in your content and it's the only thing I see on my feed and someone commented, I'm going to have at least 1 to 2 scrolls of seeing your content, which is way more likely I'm going to pay attention. So it's like for them to pay attention, you need to stop the scroll and get them to like really understand and dig in. And again, generally speaking, like, check out the case study below. Feel free to DM me. If there's a link to that case study in here, yeah, that's immediately going to get flagged. Years and years of content went by on LinkedIn where people dropped a link of a case study in content and immediately LinkedIn flags it as spammy behavior and it's going to massively downrank your content. So I know we're at time, but there's a lot more of it I would dig into. I can kind of stop my share and we can talk a little bit about, next steps, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that was amazingly helpful. I really appreciate it. In terms of what is the process you set out for your clients right now, right? So you kind of like picked apart my LinkedIn profile, and I'm somebody who's already doing something out there and seen some results. So when you really help these companies figure out like how to make LinkedIn work for them, what is your process to work with them on this stuff? Do you write this for them, or like how does that work?
Yeah, so the way that we're building the model is addressing a very similar challenge to you, which is there are a lot of company pages, founders and leaders who have great things to say, but they don't have the time to manage it. So we're doing kind of full service, everything managed for you, where we run discovery calls, strategy calls. We build out sort of your content matrix, your profile, your branding kit. And then we run these one-on-one interviews, similar to how you and I are kind of running this podcast. And we take your stories and we essentially write them for you. And then we manage everything A to B, right? Just making sure that your content is going out and that it's reaching the right audience. And we run sort of like very regular deep dives on like data and patterns and performance. And I mean, it's one of the reasons why some of the clients that we've even started working with since January and February went from reaching 20, 30,000 people a month to reaching 10, 15 million per month, right? And it's like they're reaching their highest revenue goals. Their newsletter is growing at the fastest rate they've ever seen. It's because we're helping them basically take their story and their content. The years of expertise that Daniel and I have had kind of building 1.2 plus million followers on LinkedIn across marketers, and like bring all that expertise to help you, jump the 4 years of learning curve that we've had doing this to help you grow and basically turn attention into authority on.
And so you mentioned some amazing results for some clients, but how do you actually help an executive understand the sort of like dollar ROI on this eventually when they have to kind of understand, okay, like what else could I be spending on? Like what are you tracking? What are you measuring? Like what does your sort of like slide deck of results look like for them?
So one of the most important things you need to be doing as a marketer is learn how to create a great business case. And I'm actually going to be speaking about this exact topic in New York at an event called Golden Hour by Audience Plus, if anyone happens to be in New York in April in a few weeks. And the most important thing that you want to do is what you want to showcase the power of building your strategic moat. And the way that I always recommend doing that is showing the data. The first data point that I mentioned on this call, in B2B, 97% of people are not ready to buy. And when you think about the types of investments that you can make as a business, you want to be thinking about what's going to help you build a brand moat. And you're going to want to be thinking about what's going to help you not only build pipeline today, but like affinity in the long run. So the exact same stats that you're saying about, hey, I've been posting on LinkedIn and the majority of our business's pipeline comes from my content, right? You want to find the data-backed ways that you can bring that to light and showcase the flywheel of how things are growing. So the biggest thing that I always recommend is get really good with data, small scale experiments to prove your quick wins, showing data, and tell that story in no more than what's going to take someone 30 seconds to scan it. So when I first started in tech and I needed to prove the investment around media, I just took 5 Slack bullets around. We added where did you hear about us on our demo pages and all of our key points of interaction. It was just open text field and it was required. Then what we did is we would go and we'd scrape all the likes, comments, and engagement, and we would map those against our ideal customers and look for like red, yellow, green signals around intent. And we would match those against, we're using like de-anonymizing web technology like Mutiny and other things to help actually show that the people who were coming from LinkedIn were our ideal buyers. And we bring and surface those insights. You can do this for free using Clearbit right now through HubSpot if you're not already today. And then we would have just like the key points that we would highlight, which was, hey, these are the people that have engaged with us, that we've had conversations with, that were in like our ideal 100 account list. This is the number of product-led signups and like deals that have come through that have been socially influenced this week. Here is our visibility and our organic reach, impressions, engagement rate, follower count. And here's the breakdown of our matrix of who we want to reach, so like that ideal customer profile versus who our content is reaching today. And it would just be like super tactical, just like a bulleted list in Slack to where our CEO could see that. And I'd say, hey, if you were to spend paid LinkedIn to reach this, it would cost you $18,000. We delivered this for $300 and ABC that we invested in these things. And we would benchmark it against where they could be investing. But the more important thing we would do is we would showcase the power of what you don't see, which is LinkedIn is kind of like an iceberg. You only really see like that one thing. You want to look for like the intent signals. You want to look for I'll give you an example. When I was running the hot sauce sales show, Fire Talks at Dooley, Justin Welsh, who, if anyone's following LinkedIn, they probably know Justin Welsh. Justin Welsh had not liked a single one of our posts about the show, had no engagement, had no idea. And he just DM'd me out of the blue. He said, hey, I've been seeing all the content you've been creating. This is amazing. I'd love to come on the show and talk about building a personal brand in front of your audience. I'd have no record anywhere that Justin has engaged with any of the content because he didn't, but he saw it. He was interested. And then we had one of the best speakers come on. And it was one of our highest performing episodes of lifetime. You have to share those stories and those moments because the data isn't everything. Organic is, in some cases, common sense. There's a reason why HubSpot bought The Hustle. There's a reason why media companies are being invested in. It's because traditional marketing is seeing significant diminishing returns, right? And where we're going in the future, you need to build opt-in engagements with your audience. And there's a power to that. And it's one of the best ways to do that. And I found just like the stories, the anecdotal, the screenshots of comments, or those types of like use Grain or whatever it is to like record an anecdote on like a Zoom call, send those to your executive team and just keep building in public and showing the power of the conversations. that's what's going to help kind of maintain buy-in. And then again, we're already way over, so I won't go through some more of the tactics, but that's where I would start.
Amazing. Cool. Mark, this was a fantastic conversation. If anybody wants to reach you, like where's the best place to find you apart from LinkedIn, clearly?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a blast. Definitely send me a connect on LinkedIn, Mark P. Young. And if you want to learn more about what Daniel and I are doing at Authority, you can check us out at authorityb2b.com. And there's a button to join the waitlist. So really appreciate you having me. This has been great. And Parthy, we'll have to run round 2 if you want to continue the deep dive, and happy to share more tips on LinkedIn. But love what you're building. I think it's solving a massive need in the market, and excited to see what y'all keep coming up with in future iterations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.